can we start now? So we will record this. So I think we can start the recording now. Good afternoon and welcome to the second meeting of this series that we have entitled Making a Difference. Believe it or not, we have heard quite a lot of praise we have received for this initiative. Don't look at the number of participants live. We know that there are many people who have watched the recording of the first issue and are looking forward to the second issue. So we are welcoming here Sean Tate and his team from the African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum, APCOF. It's difficult for me to pronounce, but Sean and his team are doing a very interesting work in the field of policing, but not only. Something that is really at the core of the goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's something that is really touching in the area of rule of law and good governance and issues that are very close to the work that many of our NGOs members are doing. So I'm sure that it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Sean, the floor is yours. You can organize your time the way you prefer, please.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Anna, and also thank you very much to the Alliance, both for organizing these events on making a difference and inviting us to this event as well to share some of the APCOF learnings and experience. We really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our work. I'm joined here by three of my colleagues, one out of picture, that is very much part of the heart of the organization. And we're going to share the presentation between us. Essentially, we're going to cover the brief provided by the Alliance in setting up this webinar series, which was to understand how we approach our work, what we decide to do, what our programming looks like in practice, and then to come back and speak to how we assess ourselves and measure our impact. And so we've structured it according to these three areas. I'll start off by giving you a little bit of a background on APCOF and its theory of change and its strategy going forward. I'll then hand over to my colleague Louise Edwards. She's the Director of Research and Programming, and she will speak to some of the programs and projects that we currently have running. And then I'll hand over to my colleague Abdirahman Gassar. He is a project and research officer here at APCOF, and he will speak to a recent evaluation that we've done on our strategy and the indicators and methodology we used to assess impact and some of the results and observations that has brought through. And we'll open it up then for questions, and we're happy to engage you on all aspects of the work. It's something that we're very passionate about. Criminal justice, policing, and in particular, our particular area of work, police accountability is very close to our heart. It's a very dynamic, it's a very interesting subject, and we have a lot to speak about. We prepared short presentations that would cover each of these sections of work, and I will then share the screen, hopefully that works, and take you through the first piece of the conversation. Yeah, great. So APCOF, an organization that has been around since 2006. It arose out of a conversation between oversight practitioners on the continent around how lessons could be exchanged and shared towards promoting police accountability. And at that point, it was hosted by the then Independent Complaints Directorate of South Africa, an independent police oversight body established by law. The outcome of that discussion, that conference, was to form a network of practitioners to be able to take the business of police accountability forward. That network continued for a period of time until the importance of registering the organization, adopting a legal identity became imperative. And this was for various reasons. One, our intercept with rights bodies such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Our request for observer status required a formalization of the entity, and our ability to raise funds. So we took the network, formalized it into an organization, a Section 21 company under South African law, which is a non-profit. And in 2012, we were re-established as a trust, which provided slightly more flexible approach to governance. And it saw us continue the network, but in the format of an advisory board. And that has been instrumental for the work that APCOF has done. It's a small organization based in South Africa, but it has a continental footprint, and that continental footprint has really been steered and mentored by our network of colleagues and practitioners in the form of an advisory board. So very briefly, what is it that we do? We work on issues of police accountability and governance in Africa, and we are guided by those 4 values that you see on your screens. We seek to promote police accountability because of the utility that it has in terms of restoring public confidence in the police, because of its role it plays in developing a culture of human rights, the importance it has in terms of promoting integrity and transparency within the police. And here we're very much guided by the notion of democratic policing and building towards a system of democratic policing. And because of the importance that accountability has in underpinning, underscoring relationship building between police and community. So before we go into our theory of change, it's useful just to reflect on some of the basic principles of police accountability. And this is where the excitement and the dynamism of the work we do really becomes apparent. So the first big distinction is that oversight is not just about looking at the consequence of actions. It is not only about after the fact, about investigating potential abuses or complaints and looking at disciplinary action. A very important part of oversight is also about the legislation, the policy, the regulations, the operating procedures that underpin the kind of policing that we want to see. If we don't know what those are, if we don't have a vision of where we're going, if we don't have strong operating procedures and good legislation, then it becomes more and more difficult when it comes to holding someone to account, understanding what went right, what went wrong, looking at trying to address issues of non-repetition or non-recurrence. You need to have a look at the pre-the-fact environment as well. And a lot of our work, it's balanced across the two, is both the retrospective oversight as well as the standard setting, law reform, policy and technical support that happens pre-the-fact. Then, very importantly, oversight is also understood as happening across the whole sphere of society. And in this diagram, it is simplified into these 3 environments. There is the external environment. These are national human rights commissions, independent police oversight bodies, ombudsmen that have a role external to the police in the sphere of government to conduct oversight. Either they may policy recommendations, or they go in a lot more specific focus and do investigations around complaints and address errant behavior. Then oversight also happens internally within the organization. So these are the discipline units, the discipline systems, the performance management systems that exist within the police organization. It's about supervision and management. It's about corrective behavior. It's about identifying errant behavior and the sanctions that are imposed in relation to that. And then there's the civil space. And the civil space is complex in the extent that it's not just you and me as the recipients of policing that are the purveyors of the complaints, and also the disseminators of the results of those investigations. But it also exists within the other spheres of the state, so the judiciary playing a very important role in terms of police actions and the accountability of police actions. It includes police trade unions and the role that they play in terms of the organization and the accountability of the organization. It includes the media and the extent to which they identify and raise issues of concern and respond to those issues of concern. Oversight needs to happen in all of these three spaces for it to be strong and robust. Any one of these missing creates an imbalance in the system, and also is a situation of putting all your eggs in one basket. So if our internal systems don't work, but we don't have an external system, and we have a civil society whose voice is restricted, if that internal system doesn't work, it means police oversight doesn't work. And likewise, with any of them missing, the situation is weakened. But together, they can contribute towards a far more robust process of holding police to account. What it also does at this point is it raises some very important theoretical underpinnings when we think about police accountability in the sphere of democratic policing. The police are accountable to multiple audiences. Each of those audiences are important, and each of those has a key role to play. So how do we engage with this very complicated environment? What do we do as a small organization? Well, our goal is to make police in Africa more accountable, and we have three intermediate strategies, intermediate processes that we engage on to take us towards this. First is recognizing the importance of political support for an accountable police. So we're looking to try and increase that political support for police accountability. It's an expensive, it's a contested, it's a complicated endeavor, and it requires political support. Second is to try and build the capacity in government and in civil society around how we hold the police to account. And thirdly is to, in recognition of the uniqueness, the nuancing, the complexity, is to learn from this community of reform practitioners, policymakers, police oversight practitioners across the continent around how issues are being addressed, how challenges are being overcome within the policing environment, and to build up this community. And this community of practitioners is also the sustainability of the enterprise. So the more people invested, the more people knowledgeable, the more people involved and passionate about this, the greater the opportunities for sustainability. So across each of those environments, we look to increase support for police accountability by building knowledge. We're looking at ways in which we monitor and evaluate the impact this is having on those initial vision and mission objectives of the organization, i.e. restoring confidence, building trust, building relationships. If we're able to see what contribution police oversight is making towards that agenda, then we can use that to demonstrate value for money to our to the political champions that take police accountability forward. And then looking at the development of standards, so going back to that proactive oversight agenda, saying, you know, if we get the standards, if we get the law right, we are far more likely to be on the right track towards addressing and preventing the occurrence of errant behavior. We look to try and improve practice. So we're looking at tools at regional and local level that would assist us in understanding the business of policing and understanding the business of holding police to account. We're looking at the law and the regulations around what constitutes for good oversight. Regulations can be improved. We're very much guided by the seminal work that was done by Philip Alston about 10 years ago, looking at benchmarking police oversight during his term as rapporteur for extrajudicial killing, and understanding the importance of strong legal mandates, independence, capacity, and working with civil society as some of the key ingredients towards achieving that. Then, as I said, we look to build on that initial kind of establishment of APCOF as a network by continuing to build this community of practitioners. We join networks, we invite people to participate with us in the programming that we do. So we are a member of the Alliance, and our membership of the Alliance and our participation in this event is very much towards continuing to contribute to the building of this community of practitioners. I'm going to run through these slides very quickly. They start to speak to some of the issues that Louise is going to address around knowledge building and knowledge sharing. But some of the areas where we are particularly interested in at the moment is looking to better understand those challenges to successful police oversight, particularly in the African context, to build knowledge around the trajectories that we see emerging of state and non-state policing. Policing itself is a very complex undertaking, and there are many different traditions and legal traditions on the continent. So to understand how this is taking place and what is happening and what that means when we get back to accountability, and to understand police accountability and police performance in relation to substantive areas, and some of those that we've mapped out. And again, Louise will come back to this, and Abdirahman would speak to this as well around impact, is those substantive areas where we know that the most likelihood of complaints would occur, and that's in arrest, in detention, in the management of police assemblies, in police use of force, issues around corruption, and then some of the new areas emerging, such as technology, privacy issues, and at the moment as well, trying to understand accountability within the context of states of emergency and disasters, such as characterized by COVID to a certain extent. But there are many other states of emergency that happen either nationally or in areas of countries across the continent. We're looking to promote human rights. So a lot of the knowledge work that we're doing is about, and capacity building work that we're doing is about understanding how rights can be better implemented at local level, how they can be better articulated, and how we can disseminate that knowledge to police audiences as well as to the oversight practitioners. Supporting the development of systems of accountability. I think, interestingly, in South Africa, we have a new system of accountability with the recent ratification of OPCAT and the establishment of a national preventive mechanism. And so that preventive mechanism, with its role in providing independent monitoring of police custody, becomes a new space of police accountability for us in South Africa. Finally, towards ending up, our approach, and this is going back, is across this broad agenda. What do? We network, we build these partnerships, we create them so that we're able to share knowledge, identify good practice and share that good practice. We advocate in terms of law reform, we provide technical support, we provide training, and we disseminate via media. Some of the challenges, and I'll end off here with my colleagues coming back to this, and hopefully some of the conversation later on, is that political will towards policing oversight and accountable policing remains ambivalent. There's continuing public support for securitized and punitive responses. There's the resistance internally to oversight. There's the cost of the undertaking. Alarmingly, there is this shrinking of civil spaces, particularly when engaging the security sector, and this increasing use of state of emergency provisions. So certainly COVID-19 has been one very graphic example of this, but across the continent, states of emergency have been introduced rather regularly. And with that, we've seen considerable backsliding around the transparency and accountability of police. So that's our basic theory of change and some of the mapping of the terrain that we're working in. What that looks like in terms of practical work, I'm going to hand over to Louise Edwards to take us through that. And in the interim, I will just do a quick slide change and she'll take it over. So Louise, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sean. So I'll just spend 2 minutes looking, as Sean has said, this issue of APCOF programming. And I think one of the key strengths of APCOF has very much been the extent to which we've been able to be flexible and responsive to needs. As Sean mentioned, the police accountability environment is incredibly dynamic. When Sean was starting this work on the continent 20 years ago, or less than 20 years ago, police accountability was not something that was well understood and not something that was discussed at any great length in the context of human rights, nor even criminal justice circles. And so it's very dynamic. It's an emerging area. And as you'll have seen from Sean's presentation, it's also an area that has a much broader footprint than just what we would think about as sort of traditional police accountability discourse. So it's more than just about supporting, establishing and supporting traditional ideas of police accountability, such as your statutory mechanisms, but it's really around setting the standards, capacitating various actors to make assessments against those standards, and then looking at how we can then enforce and promote change in policing practice through being responsive to the types of recommendations and things that come out of that review and accountability process. So making sure we've got the capacity and agility to respond to this incredibly dynamic environment is something that we've had to do with a lot of planning, budgetary planning and internal capacity planning. But notwithstanding that, there are 4 key areas, key programmatic areas in terms of APCOF's work. And I'll just give a few, what I think are interesting examples of each of the 4. So we've got the building and sharing knowledge, the promoting human rights and democratic standards, support to development of systems of police accountability, that more traditional sphere, and then finally the networking. So on the building and sharing knowledge, I mean, I think that this really sort of sits at the core of APCOF's programmatic work, and one of our main strengths is that what we're doing is we're building a knowledge-based approach to this issue. So we're not just doing our advocacy and we're not just doing our technical support, based on ideas we think work, but it's based on very, very solid and meticulous research bases. And where we are trying to build and share knowledge is really in 2 spheres. The first is acknowledging that on our continent, we have an enormous depth of capacity and interest in criminal justice and human rights and policing issues. And what we're trying to do is as part of building a community of practitioners is to ensure that there is high level and in-depth information around police accountability available. And so what we've done here is to partner with the University of Pretoria's Centre for Human Rights, which is probably the premier law school and human rights program on the continent, attracting students from across the continent. And we offer a couple of advanced master's levels human rights courses, short courses offered over the course of a week to their PhD and master's students, as well as inviting participation from other academics as well as practitioners working on these issues or interested in these issues across the continent. And it includes on topics such as Police Accountability 101, and then more specialised subjects such as on issues around discrimination and policing, for example. Then the second element of this building and sharing knowledge is our research agenda. And so what we do here is when we want to work in an area, we really build the work from a base of research, so that when we're crafting recommendations, when we're crafting our technical support, when we're identifying ways in which we're going to seek to intervene around these issues, we're backed by some research. Two interesting things that we've been doing of late is actually in South Africa. So in South Africa, what we're trying to do is to end the criminalisation of poverty and status through the enforcement of minor laws by the police, which either target homeless people or people who are targeted because of their status. And so we recently conducted research on this issue, and it's really informing then our advocacy agenda forward and our support to some litigation on foot here. And then we also recognised that the accountability framework in South Africa is not effective at responding to deep and troubling challenges in the way in which the police in South Africa are dealing with what you would have heard, I'm sure, of incidences of very serious and widespread xenophobic violence. And so we took a step back and tried, through research that we've published this year, to understand where are the key challenges in terms of the detention, prevention and combating of this type of violence, and where are the intervention points, not only in terms of the technical support we are now providing to the police in relation to this, but how do we strengthen the framework that should be engaging and responding to these issues. We can go to the next slide. So the second issue is this promotion of human rights and democratic policing standards. And organisations across the continent probably, our colleagues probably know us best for this type of work. So we've made significant efforts to, so if we're talking about accountability, what are the standards to which we're expecting the police to be held accountable to? So we've made significant efforts at a continental and at a sub-regional level to first establish a normative standard for rights-based and democratic policing on the continent. And we've done this mainly through technical support. I mean, it starts with a lot of advocacy and lobbying, and results in technical support to mechanisms of the African Union. So that includes to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And we've successfully there managed to navigate the adoption by them of key regional soft law standards. So interpreting the binding obligations of African states in terms of operational policing on issues of arrest and detention through the Luanda guidelines, on issues of the policing of assemblies, and on issues of the decriminalisation of petty offences. Interestingly, the guidelines on the conditions of arrest, police custody and pre-trial detention include a section which, for the first time on the African continent, and probably globally, articulates a framework for what a rights-based approach to a police accountability architecture should look like. And the value to this in our work is that what we're doing is establishing a normative framework, something that we can pin and hook the work to in terms of police accountability. It's not just us coming in and saying police accountability is a good idea, but it's saying here are your international and now your African Union level legal and political commitments to human rights and democratic standards. And here is how they have been authoritatively interpreted in terms of operational policing. So it really does provide a hook. We've also worked with the Pan-African Parliament on a model law for police in Africa, and with a security sector reform framework with the African Union's security and committee. We've also done a lot of work then at implementation. So the implementation element is at a national level and at a regional level. So getting these mechanisms to use their own work, and in terms of the mandate areas of the Parliament, in terms of the mandate areas of the African Commission, getting them to push these in terms of state practice, but also us engaging with national stakeholders at a local level. To give you just one example of where we've sort of seen traction here, we worked in South Africa with the Department of Justice on a review to assess the extent to which South Africa was meeting its obligations under these guidelines on the conditions of arrest, police custody and pre-trial detention. And that evidence-based review identified a couple of key areas of weakness. And we were able to then turn that, and it might be a surprise to most of you, but despite South Africa's reasonably good framework for police accountability on paper, we actually don't have a system for the regular and independent monitoring of police custody. And so that study identified that, and we were able to parlay that into a project with the South African Human Rights Commission to pilot a system for lay monitoring. Then in terms of supporting the development of systems of accountability, we give direct technical support to institutions that have been established by constitution or law to do police accountability work. So we were instrumental in the development of the Sierra Leone Police Complaints Board. So it was established by law, and we, using our expertise and the research and the knowledge that we gained with the work over the years, essentially built the systems it required to function. And we're trying to do something similar at the moment with the National Preventative Mechanism under OPCAT for South Africa. And then finally, we also engage in networking. So this engagement today is part of that grand plan of APCOF. It's acknowledging that policing accountability, policing human rights and democratic policing issues exist not only in the conversations we have with the policing sector, but it exists across a number and intersects with a number of key sectors. And so what we do is we kind of offer our technical support and experience around this, but also seek to engage, learn from, and share knowledge and resources. And that just on that slide is a list of some of the key regional and international networks that we're part of. I'll end my presentation here and hand to my colleague Abdirahman Malim Gossar, who's going to have a look based on some assessments we had done of where APCOF is finding traction, impacting some of the key challenges.
Thank you very much, Louise. Hi, everyone. So as shown as introduced me, my name is Abdirahman Malim Gossar, and I'm a project and research officer here at APCOF. I'm going to take us through a very brief discussion on the impact of our work thus far. In order to assess of our interventions, we have developed some key indicators of success, which also serves as a basis for all impact evaluation activities that we conduct to assess the extent to which we achieve our desired outcomes and the ultimate goal of promoting accountable policing on the continent. And as has already been alluded to by my colleague Sean and Louise also, we seek to promote accountable policing within the continent through the achievement of three interrelated and intermediate outcomes, or what Sean referred to as interrelated strategies or and process. So to assess the achievement of outcome one, that is increased political support for accountable policing, we examine whether there is increased awareness of the value of police accountability. We also look at whether there are individuals advocating for police accountability at domestic, regional, and continental level. We also examine the extent to which there is investment of resources in police accountability, and also whether they are agreed upon standards for police conduct that accountability agents and agencies can use as a benchmark for holding the police accountable. And outcome 2, we assess whether there is increased knowledge and understanding around practices to hold the account, and also relevant whether relevant agents and agencies have the skills, the necessary skills to operationalize accountability measures and systems within the continent. With regard to outcome 3, we explore whether there is increasingly a common human rights agenda that includes and emphasizes police accountability as an essential part of improvement in policing and human rights. So, as Sean has already highlighted, to try and measure the intervention, in October 2019, we commissioned an evaluation exercise, which was guided by our strategic framework for the period 2015 to 2020. It consisted of a review of selected APCOF documents, and including our strategic plan, our annual reports, and other reports and documents we have published or that we have supported the publication of. It also consisted of a closed question survey, which survey was circulated to key informants who are within the realm of police accountability in Africa. Some key observations came out of the evaluation. The 2019 adoption of a model police law for Africa by the plenary session of the Pan-African Parliament stood out to many respondents as APCOF's most significant achievements in outcome 1. The model police law was adopted with the objective of ensuring policing practices are conducted in accordance with established human rights principles in the international law, and also within our regional human rights system, most importantly through the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and its soft law subordinate instruments. The adoption also by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights of guidelines on conditions of arrest, police custody, and pretrial detention in Africa, also known as the Rwanda guidelines for the location of the adoption, and which my colleague Louise has already highlighted, also came out as a clear indicator that reflects increased political support for police accountability in the continent. As a normative standards, the guidelines set out measures and conditions that are designed to promote a right-based approach to the use of arrest and detention within the continent. In August 2015, the African Commission adopted a resolution to expand the mandate of what was then the special rapporteur on prisons and conditions of detention in Africa to include policing. This was also identified as an important step in promoting the recognition of the need for police accountability on the continent. The rapporteur's jurisdiction now is defined as prisons, conditions of detention, and policing in Africa. APCOF lobbied to have the policing included in the special rapporteur's mandate. This now makes it an area of oversight for the special rapporteur on our promotional activities and also in terms of state reporting to the African Commission. The next 2 slides reflect the respondents' thoughts regarding APCOF's contribution to achieving outcome 1. The survey asked respondents to provide their perceptions of APCOF's contribution to this outcome. As we can see from this chart, the majority of respondents reported that they think that APCOF has contributed to a great extent to building awareness of the issue of police accountability in key forums at continental, regional, and national levels. Here again, our respondents were overwhelmingly positive about the extent to which APCOF has contributed to the development of legislations and standards for policing that are both relevant and applicable in the continental, regional, and also a country level context. Makes sense. In terms of challenges encountered in achieving outcome one, politics continues to be a major impediment to the entrenchment of accountable policing, as is shown highlighted briefly. This differs depending on the country, how government is structured, and the place of police within that structure. There is also the temptation to use the police to secure and retain power. Partisan policing and harassment for position leaders is not completely common in some parts of the region. And although there are existing and progressive reform processes across the continent, in some regions, we still see acts of partisan policing, particularly in the context of public order policing, where police are more inclined to disperse assemblies and gatherings. And the objectives of assemblies are regarded as inconsistent with the views of the ruling party, sometimes in the process using arbitrary excessive force. As regards evaluation of outcome two, respondents were asked for their observations regarding the extent to which APCOF has contributed to building the knowledge and skills required for civil society to play an active role in promoting police accountability. As is reflected in this chart, 58% report that APCOF has done so to a great extent. 29% felt that we have done this to a good extent, and then 9.7% say somewhat. On outcome three, the question was whether APCOF has contributed to building a network of practitioners that support police accountability programming. As we can deduce from the chart, the survey data revealed that the vast majority of respondents believe that APCOF has contributed to building a network of practitioners at a country, regional, and also continental levels. An important contribution in the outcome three has been to convene events where there will be cross-sectoral engagement about policing, human rights, and accountability. Police are often seen as inaccessible and insular, but we've made contributions to establishing an environment in which it is normal for police to be involved in dialogue around policing and police accountability and human rights, not only with each other, but also with civil society organizations. To assess the extent to which the three interrelated outcomes are contributing to our overall goal of improved police accountability across the continent of Africa, respondents were asked whether APCOF has contributed to improving police accountability. They were slightly more cautious in their response, but still, the majority thought we have done so to a great extent. In conclusion, I thought we should have a quick review of some of our main contributions and strengths as identified by survey respondents. In response to questions about APCOF's main contribution and strength, respondents variously identified these factors. A major contribution of APCOF has been contributing to the popularization and credibility of the mission of policing that is in line with principles of democratic policing, human rights, and the rule of law. APCOF has also contributed to building knowledge about this. In this regard, respondents variously referred to norm settings or setting of standards and creating awareness about them as one of our key contributions. One of the main strengths of APCOF's work, as it regards to, is that one of our strengths is that it is knowledge-based. Our work is knowledge-based in that it is grounded in research, but also includes technical knowledge about putting ideas into practice. Another act of strength was described as a stronger orientation towards creative dialogue. As I have already noted, one of our important contributions has been to convene events where there have been cross-sectoral engagements about policing, human rights, and accountability. In discussing potential areas of focus in our work going forward, several respondents also reported that one of APCOF's merits lay in the relative specificity of our work. While there are various dimensions to our work, such as promoting the establishment of accountability agencies and then promoting human rights standards, APCOF's overall vision and the body of work that it does is fairly coherent and relatively easily understood. Finally, APCOF's work has been characterized by a commitment to flexibility associated partly with, at least before the outbreak of COVID-19, a willingness to accommodate a demanding travel schedule. I will stop here and hand back to Sean to take us through the questions and answer session.
Well, thank you very much, Wassar. Thank you very much, Louise, to those inputs. I'm going to hand back to you, Anna, in case there are any questions from those in attendance or anything that you'd like to ask us about our work. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much. This was not only informative, but I think it's going to be a very precious resource for many of our NGOs to see how you can really create a very clear framework, also to progressively assess what you are doing, taking into account internal and external stresses and the difficulty to work in an environment that is quite political and quite complicated. So really, thank you. This is so important these days to see the real work that is connected, as I said, to this ideal of the goal 16 of strong and accountable institutions, but in reality, so you are really doing the work that is important for making institutions accountable. So thank you very much. I see that there are several participants that are opening their video, so maybe there are questions. And ask Tobias also to help me.
Yes,
please.
Linda has 2 questions. And I will just let Linda speak.
Please, Linda.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. It's important to me, the policing, because Jean Sarson and I are participants on an inquiry of a mass shooting here in Nova Scotia, Canada. And in that, in the shooting, it was found that the police really were not effective. The inquiry hasn't decided that, but from what we're gathering, the police were definitely one of the issues of missing the red flags. So how does human rights affect rooting out misogyny in policing? Because that's what was happening in Nova Scotia. They were missing the behavior of the shooter, the violent behavior because of the misogyny, not listening to women coming forward. So do you find that you include an element about misogyny and particularly around women's rights in your human rights education? And the second one is, how do you decrease the corruption in the governing bodies? Because Jean and I, in speaking to a former city mayor in Canada, and others, they're saying that the people on the police governance board are chosen sort of as tokens so that they don't hold the police accountable. And even the mayor told us that when he tried to hold the police accountable in the city of Toronto, a large city in our country, he was harassed by the police. So, you know, the corruption is quite serious. Trying to destroy anyone who exposes the malpractice of the police. Thank you.
I think we should collect another question that we have from Jane in the chat. I don't know if you can read it,
Yes.
Sean and colleagues.
Oh, I'm happy
Okay.
to read it.
We can read it loud actually, because in the recording it will not appear. And Jean, can you repeat the question, because it's not possible to have the chat in the recording? Thank you.
Okay, my question was something like Linda's around the misogyny in police and the sexism, because we know there's inequality for women and girls, human rights inequality in many aspects. And I was wondering not only about the misogyny and the sexism and how that influences policing interventions, but also what we have often been told that police departments will benefit from women being involved or being recruited into police departments. At the same time, in Nova Scotia, for Linda and I, in interviewing women who were police women, and we've just had a very large inquiry into our federal police force, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And that was very shocking at how much discrimination that the female police officers endured. And actually, they ended up, I guess, in legal battles with the RCMP. So I was just wondering if that is part of your work of addressing how women police members are benefit, or if they have problems with discrimination too because of who they are. And I was wondering, when it comes to how women and girls are victimized, if you can see that the courts treat them differently than because they are women and girls. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those questions. We'll respond quickly and then we can maybe get a next round. I'll venture a few observations and then hand over to my colleagues. First of all, the issue is certainly on our agenda and it has been strengthened in our strategy going forward in terms of the variation around understanding police accountability and its impact, that it is not equal for all. There are a couple of kind of responses to the challenges that you've said. The one is that the strength of the accountability mechanism is key. So if there are complaints that are not being addressed, that are being swept under the carpet, that is something that we need to look at in terms of the operations of the accountability mechanism, to understand why that is happening and to put the systems in place to prevent it from happening. The second is that we locate the work that we do with regard to the vision of policing in this notion of democratic policing. And democratic policing, one of its core underpinnings is that it should represent the demographics of the constituency that it serves. And so women's participation is not the track, well, they seem to be making a difference and they improve, but it is fundamental to the character of the organization. There's no value issue here. It's, you know, women are 50% and sometimes more than 50% of the population, and the service should reflect that as well. We've been looking at some of the challenges, and there are two very useful publications on our website. The one is looking at a police organization that has a gender mainstreaming policy, the Uganda Police Force, and the challenges that they've had in terms of achieving on that policy and understanding what are the barriers both within the organization but within society that impact on the performance of women in the organization and their satisfaction and their growth and their career trajectories in the organization. And the other is to look at our standards and to try and understand whether the standards that we espouse, like the protection of liberty or prevention of arbitrary detention, whether the ways in which those are articulated uphold the whole notion of gender mainstreaming and the safety of women in a society. and what we need to do to think about that in a more sophisticated way. So both of those initial pieces of research are on our website, and issues that we look to take forward. But Louise, I see you nodding, so I'm sure you want to jump.
No, I don't have much more to add to that, except to reiterate what Sean was saying, is that questions not only around gender, but more broadly of intersectionality are becoming issues we can't ignore, and we're engaging with, certainly in terms of developing our own theories and sort of strategies around it, and then engaging in the very difficult task of taking what we know are human rights standards, interpreting them in terms of what this should mean for the police. But the toughest question is, it's not the theory, it's the how you operationalise that knowledge within a police organisation, and how you operationalise that knowledge in terms of the oversight structures that operate in relation to the police. And one thing that we're doing that's quite interesting, and once it's possible to share publicly, we will, is that we're doing precisely this in terms of operational guidance note on effective gender mainstreaming for police organisations. We're doing it at a sub-regional level within Africa, but the process of developing this, I think, has almost got universal application. And I think we'll look to the first quarter of 2022. So your question is actually quite timely, and publishing something about the learnings, which might be useful in terms of that inquiry and the work which you're doing in Canada. But yeah, so it very much looks at not strictly the theory and not strictly the kind of the understanding and articulating the intersection, but it's more how do we operationalise what we know is the right way to do things. And that's for us the thrust of the work that we'll do, I think, into next year. Yeah, and it'll be up on our website, yeah, probably by mid-year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any other questions, because I would have a question myself.
I don't see anyone with their hand raised at the moment. And it's already shortly after 4, so maybe we finish with Anna's question.
Okay, so thank you very quickly. No, my question is a bit, less on the priority, on the usual priorities, and it's much concerned with the work that I've been doing in my previous life. I wanted to ask you if the issue of data collection is something that you have come across as an element that would increase the transparency and accountability of these forces. Normally, in my experience, data collection and statistics rank very low in police work. I would like to know what is your experience and how it connects with good governance.
Do you want to take that, Louise?
You want to start? I can supplement.
Sure. Well, Anna, I agree with you that the data is the first step in understanding the extent of the issue or the problem or the challenge that we're facing. And as we start delving into that data, the extent to which we can get disaggregation around what it is that is going wrong and how we can start addressing it. So we've just published a report. It's also on our website. It is on the use of lethal force by the South African Police Services. And the strength of data comes out here in two ways, very strongly. The first of all, it quantifies the extent to which lethal force or potentially lethal force is being used by the police in relation also to the extent to which police face the threat of potential lethal force. And we're starting to see that this is not, the South Africa that is violent, and if police don't use lethal force, they are not going to be able to protect themselves. It's actually not the case. And that we are starting to err in South Africa towards a police that are slightly more risky when it comes to the use of lethal force. Secondly, by looking at the statistics that have come out around where lethal force has been used, what has caused it, we're starting to see that there are some risk factors that we can start addressing. So a lot of the instances are the police have not been approached by another firearm when they've thought of resorting to lethal force. It has been a knife or a blunt instrument or a sharp-pointed instrument. And then that starts to point you towards thinking through, well, what is the training saying? What are the alternatives that are available that we can deal with? And just to end this off, the intervention is part of a continental intervention that we are doing in collaboration with the network of African NHOIs to develop the understanding around the risks of lethal force use on the continent. And the challenge is that the data is not forthcoming from other countries. And despite all the good intention of, yes, we want to participate in this, yes, we want to engage in this, we see the value, getting that data that is credible, that will allow you to make those policy inputs is just not there. And so a huge agenda item is around collecting and building the systems to be able to collect and make this data available. And again, when we're talking about resource-constrained organizations, it is not an easy task. It's not something that you could just, flick of a switch and it happens. There's considerable investment by the administration and bureaucracy to make that happen, but it is an incredibly important investment that has to be made.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think that we have used all our time. I wish to thank the participants who have been here, and Sean, Louise, and Bashir. I don't know, I didn't get your name correct, but anyway, was it correct? Okay, thank you. Congratulations, because you have given us really food for thought and an excellent example of making a difference. Thank you. We will promote the video of this event on our website, and we look forward to meeting you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, and to the Alliance. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.